The kiss was not the betrayal. It was the signal that her husband's real plan had begun. The roar of the 2026 FIFA World Cup quarterfinal poured through Evelyn Mercer's television speakers, filling the dark living room with the sound of 90,000 strangers celebrating beneath white stadium lights. She sat alone on the edge of a pale sofa, 8 months pregnant, one hand supporting the weight of her belly. Beside the remote rested a pair of tiny white shoes Grant had promised to carry into the hospital when their daughter was born. He had called from the airport 6 hours earlier. Sponsors, contracts, private negotiations. "This trip decides our future, Evie," he had said. "Stay home and rest." Evelyn had believed the second sentence longer than the first. On the screen, the broadcast camera swept across the luxury box above the field. Famous athletes waved. Executives raised crystal glasses. Then the camera stopped. Grant Mercer appeared at the center of the frame, his sandy brown hair perfectly styled, his navy jacket open, his steel blue eyes shining with the confidence of a man who believed every room existed to admire him. Sloane Avery sat beside him. She wore Evelyn's blue silk scarf, the one Grant had given his wife on their 5th anniversary. A gold bracelet circled Sloane's wrist, engraved with the date Evelyn and Grant had married. Evelyn's breath caught. Her daughter moved sharply beneath her ribs. On television, the commentator laughed. "There is Grant Mercer, founder of Mercer Sports Live, with the woman many are calling his secret weapon. Perhaps American sports media has found its newest power couple." Sloane leaned toward Grant and whispered something. He smiled. It was not the polite smile he gave investors or the practiced expression he wore in interviews. It was intimate, familiar, the smile Evelyn had once believed belonged only to her. Then Grant looked directly into the camera, not past it, into it. For one suspended second, his gaze seemed to cross the distance between the stadium and the dark room where his pregnant wife sat waiting. Evelyn understood before he moved. He wanted her to see. Grant placed one hand beneath Sloane's chin and kissed her slowly while the crowd erupted over a goal below them. The remote slipped from Evelyn's fingers and struck the hardwood floor. The tiny white shoes fell beside it, landing on their sides. Her phone began vibrating against the table. Messages arrived from friends, employees, reporters, and numbers she did not recognize. Every notification carried the same frozen image, Grant's mouth against Sloane's, her scarf bright beneath the stadium lights. Evelyn did not scream. She did not cry. She watched until the broadcast moved away, then muted the television. The sudden silence felt heavier than the noise. Her phone lit again. This message came from an unknown number. "The kiss is not the plan," it read. "It is the trigger." Evelyn stared at the words. A second message appeared before she could breathe. "Check the nursery camera before he deletes it." Her hand moved protectively over her daughter. Across the room, the unfinished nursery door stood open, darkness waiting beyond it. Evelyn rose slowly, leaving the fallen shoes on the floor. For the first time that night, she was no longer watching her husband's performance. She was searching for the truth behind it. 4 days before the quarterfinal, Grant Mercer had performed tenderness with the precision of a man rehearsing for cameras. Morning sunlight spilled across the marble kitchen while Evelyn stood barefoot beside the island, one hand beneath her 8-month belly. Grant approached from behind, brushed her honey-blonde hair over one shoulder, and pressed his palm gently against the place where their daughter was moving. "There she is," he said warmly. The housekeeper smiled from across the room. Grant smiled back. Evelyn watched his reflection in the glass cabinets and wondered why his affection always became softer when someone else could witness it. When the housekeeper carried breakfast into the dining room, Grant's hand fell away. "I need you to sign a few documents before I leave," he said. The warmth vanished from his voice. He placed a thin folder on the counter and turned it toward her. The cover read maternal insurance authorization. "Routine protection," he explained. "The company needs everything updated before the trip." Evelyn scanned the first page. Medical coverage. Emergency contacts. Temporary decision-making authority. Nothing looked unusual until she reached the final sheet and noticed another page positioned carefully over the bottom half. "What is underneath this?" she asked. Grant's jaw tightened. "Legal language." Evelyn lifted the covering page. Grant's hand came down over the folder. "Hard. Fast. You do not need to analyze every sentence." She looked at his fingers pressing the paper flat. "Then you should not mind if I read it." For 1 second, anger moved across his face without disguise. Then his assistant entered the kitchen carrying his travel itinerary, and Grant released the folder as though nothing had happened. "Take your time," he said with a polished smile. 10 years earlier, Evelyn had taken her time with everything. She had built PulseMap in a rented apartment, writing code through the night while Grant called potential investors from the hallway. The system could predict when sports audiences would change channels, purchase subscriptions, or respond to sponsors. Grant understood immediately what it could become. Evelyn understood only that they were building it together. Her name appeared on the first patent draft. Grant's name appeared on every magazine cover that followed. When Mercer Sports Live became profitable, he told reporters the algorithm had been developed by his technical team. Evelyn stayed silent because she believed marriage did not require public credit. Her mother disagreed. Before she died, Margaret Hart insisted that PulseMap remain registered under Evelyn's maiden name. Mercer Sports Live received only an annual license, renewed through the Hart Intellectual Property Trust. Grant called the arrangement old-fashioned. He signed every renewal without reading it. By afternoon, Evelyn was still thinking about the hidden page. She opened Grant's shared calendar, searching for the insurance attorney listed on the folder. Instead, she found an appointment scheduled 2 days after the World Cup match. Dr. Warren Pike, Psychiatric Competency Evaluation. Patient, Evelyn Hart Mercer. She stared at the screen. She had never met Dr. Pike. She had never requested an evaluation. Beneath the appointment was a note entered by Grant's office. Spousal authorization prepared. Signature pending. Evelyn looked toward the folder on the kitchen counter. The covered page was no longer there. The nursery camera opened with a soft electronic chime, and Evelyn immediately understood why someone wanted the recording erased. She stood in the dark doorway, the television's muted stadium lights still flashing across the hallway behind her. The unfinished crib rested beneath a painted wall of pale clouds. A folded blanket waited across the rocking chair. Everything in the room had been chosen for a child Grant had already decided to use as leverage. Evelyn lowered herself carefully onto the edge of the chair and opened the security application on her phone. Most recordings showed nothing unusual. Delivery workers carrying boxes, decorators measuring curtains, Evelyn arranging books on a shelf. Then she found a clip from 13 days earlier, captured at 11:42 in the morning. Grant entered first. Sloane followed him into the nursery wearing dark glasses and Evelyn's blue scarf. They believed the house was empty. They also believed the camera above the closet had been disconnected. Sloane walked toward the crib and ran one finger along the unfinished wood. "What happens if she refuses to sign the permanent license?" she asked. Grant closed the door behind them. His expression held none of the charm television audiences knew. After the match, she will be too humiliated to think clearly. Evelyn stopped breathing. On the recording, Sloane turned toward him. "Humiliation does not transfer intellectual property." Grant smiled. "No, but instability does." He explained the plan with the calm precision of someone discussing quarterly projections. The kiss would happen where cameras could capture it. Evelyn would see the images, react emotionally, and confront him publicly. Grant's legal team would describe the confrontation as evidence of prenatal instability. A psychiatric evaluation had already been scheduled. A temporary guardianship petition had already been drafted. Once Evelyn was declared incapable of managing her affairs, Grant intended to control the Hart Intellectual Property Trust and sign the permanent PulseMap license himself. Sloane glanced toward the crib. "And the baby?" Grant did not hesitate. "The baby is the leverage she handed me." The words entered Evelyn like cold air. She pressed one palm over her belly as her daughter shifted beneath it. For months, Grant had complained about doctor appointments, nursery expenses, and the damage pregnancy might cause to Evelyn's public appearance. She had believed he was frightened of fatherhood. She had never imagined he was calculating how to profit from it. On the screen, Sloane lowered her voice. "You said I would be announced after the sale." "You will," Grant replied. "Once she signs, Mercer Sports Live closes at $600 million. Then Evelyn becomes a private medical matter." Sloane smiled. "And if she does not break?" Grant looked directly toward the hidden camera without seeing it. "Everyone breaks when the whole world is laughing." Evelyn's eyes burned, but no tears fell. She selected the recording and copied it to an encrypted drive. Then she sent a second copy to a private email account Grant did not know existed. The application warned her that the original file was scheduled for automatic deletion at midnight. Someone had already changed the settings. Before closing the video, Evelyn noticed one final exchange. Sloan lifted 2 stadium credentials from her handbag. The foundation paid for the suite. Grant adjusted his cuff. The Maternal Health Foundation paid for everything. Tickets, hotel, jewelry. Evelyn never checks the accounts. The recording ended. For several seconds, Evelyn sat motionless beneath the camera that had saved her life without knowing it. Then her phone vibrated. The unknown number had sent another message. You have the truth. Now leave before he realizes you found it. Evelyn looked at the tiny white clothes hanging inside the closet. She rose, locked the nursery door, and whispered to her unborn daughter, "He will not turn you into evidence." Evelyn called Claire Donovan from the nursery floor, keeping her voice low even though Grant was an ocean away. Claire had handled Margaret Hart's intellectual property estate for 15 years, and she answered with the controlled alertness of someone who had always expected this night to come. "Do not confront him," Claire said after watching the encrypted recording. "Do not send him a message. Do not let him know you understand the plan." Evelyn looked at the unfinished crib. "He intends to take my work and my daughter. Then we protect both before he lands." Claire moved quickly. Using Evelyn's authority as owner of PulseMap, she drafted an emergency suspension of Mercer Sports Live's annual license. The suspension would remain temporary pending an independent fraud review, but temporary was enough. Without PulseMap, Grant could not complete the $600 million sale. Claire also notified the foundation's outside compliance officer that charitable funds appeared to have financed Grant's hotel suite, stadium access, and gifts for Sloan. Every transaction connected to the Maternal Health Foundation was placed under immediate review. Finally, the nursery recording was delivered to the company's independent audit committee with instructions to preserve all emails, financial records, and security files before Grant's team could destroy them. Evelyn watched 3 confirmations appear on Claire's laptop screen. License suspended. Foundation accounts restricted. Audit initiated. Grant's empire had not collapsed. Not yet, but its foundation had begun to crack. "You need to leave the house now," Claire said. "His security team may receive the compliance alerts within minutes." Evelyn ended the call and moved through the nursery with deliberate care. She packed 1 small suitcase, prenatal medication, 2 dresses, a toothbrush, insurance papers, 3 sets of infant clothing. She lifted the tiny white shoes from the living room floor and placed them beside the encrypted drive. Everything else remained. The jewelry Grant had purchased after forgotten anniversaries stayed inside the bedroom safe. The designer coats stayed in the closet. Even the wedding photographs remained where they had been, because Evelyn no longer needed proof that the marriage had once existed. In Grant's study, she found the World Cup ticket envelope he had shown her 2 months earlier. 2 premium seats. He had promised one would be hers. Now the second credential belonged to Sloan. Evelyn removed her wedding ring and placed it inside the envelope. Beneath it, she wrote, "You needed me to disappear. You should have asked where I was going." At 2:11 in the morning, a dark sedan stopped beyond the estate's main cameras. Claire had arranged a driver through a private maternal safety network, not through the company. Evelyn left through the service entrance, wearing a plain coat over her maternity dress. Rain silvered her honey blonde hair as she crossed the garden. She did not look back until the car reached the gates. The mansion stood behind her, every window dark, beautiful, and empty. Her phone vibrated before the vehicle turned onto the highway. Mercer Sports Live had received formal notice that the PulseMap license was suspended. 10 seconds later, Grant called. Evelyn watched his name illuminate the screen. She did not answer. He called again. Then Sloan called. Then the company's general counsel. Evelyn powered off the phone and handed it to Claire, who sat beside her with the legal files secured across her lap. "Where are we going?" Evelyn asked. "Somewhere he cannot reach you without a court order," Claire replied. Behind them, the estate cameras recorded the final image Grant would see, his pregnant wife entering the rain and vanishing beyond the gates. Ahead, the city lights blurred through the wet glass. Evelyn rested both hands over her daughter and felt one steady kick. For the first time in years, leaving did not feel like losing. It felt like choosing who would survive. By 8 o'clock that morning, Grant Mercer had decided that the truth was too dangerous to fight directly, so he replaced it with concern. The National Studio prepared him beneath soft lights designed to make powerful men appear human. A makeup artist covered the exhaustion beneath his eyes. A producer adjusted the microphone against his navy tie. Grant kept his wedding ring visible and practiced the expression of a husband frightened for his missing wife. Sloane waited beyond the cameras, wearing cream instead of blue, her face carefully composed. "My wife is 8 months pregnant," Grant said when the interview began. "She has been under extraordinary emotional pressure, and I believe she is experiencing a serious mental health crisis." His voice lowered at the correct moment. Evelyn left without security. She suspended vital company operations. "I am terrified for her and our daughter." Across the city, Evelyn watched from a private prenatal care residence whose address did not appear in any Mercer Company record. Rain pressed against the windows. A nurse monitored her blood pressure while Claire Donovan arranged documents across a conference table. Evelyn listened as Grant described her intelligence as confusion, her escape as instability, and her legal authority as theft. He never mentioned the nursery recording. He never mentioned the forged evaluation. He never mentioned kissing Sloane before the world. "She has not managed PulseMap for years," Grant continued. "She may not understand the consequences of her actions." Evelyn's daughter moved beneath her hand. The lie hurt because Grant spoke it with complete belief. Claire muted the television. "He is following the crisis plan exactly." She opened the first folder. Inside was the psychiatric competency report scheduled before Evelyn had ever met Dr. Warren Pike. The conclusion had already been written: impaired judgment, emotional volatility, inability to manage financial affairs. The signature line remained blank. A second folder contained medical authorization forms bearing a copied version of Evelyn's signature. A third held financial transfers from the Maternal Health Foundation to the Stadium Suite, luxury hotel, jewelry store, and private driver used by Grant and Sloane. Then Claire played an email in which Grant instructed company historians to remove Evelyn Hart from every public description of PulseMap. "There is more," Claire said. The door opened, and Rachel Kim entered. Mercer Sports Live's chief financial officer looked exhausted, but her voice remained steady. "I sent the messages." Evelyn stared at her. Rachel explained that she had discovered the foundation payments 3 weeks earlier. When she questioned Grant, he ordered her to classify them as maternal outreach expenses. Later, she found the draft guardianship petition and realized he intended to blame every suspicious transaction on Evelyn after declaring her incompetent. "I could not contact you openly," Rachel said. He was monitoring company phones. She placed a secure drive on the table. It contained accounting records, internal messages, and the document Grant planned to use to seize control of PulseMap and seek temporary custody immediately after the birth. Evelyn looked down at the papers. Grant had left a blank space for the name of the hospital where she would deliver. Even her labor had been reduced to a line in his strategy. Claire placed the divorce petition before her. Evelyn signed every page. On television, Grant looked into the camera and asked his wife to come home. "Evelyn," he said, "whatever you believe happened, we can solve this privately." She removed the wedding photograph from her wallet and placed it face down beside the papers. Claire explained that the emergency hearing and acquisition meeting would be held together the following morning. "They can arrange a secure video appearance," she said. "You would never need to enter the building." Evelyn looked at her reflection in the rain-darkened window. Her honey-blonde hair fell loosely around her pale face, but her eyes no longer belonged to the woman who had watched the quarterfinal in silence. She rested one hand over her daughter. "No," she said. He turned a camera into a weapon. Then she closed Grant's guardianship petition. "I will make him see me standing." At 9 the next morning, Grant Mercer walked onto the acquisition stage believing the room still belonged to him. The auditorium had been designed for victory. White lights, mirrored walls, a 30-foot screen displaying the Mercer Sports Live logo, and $600 million waiting behind a stack of unsigned contracts. Investors filled the front rows. Reporters crowded the aisles. Cameras pointed toward the table where Grant would announce the largest sports media sale of the year. Sloane sat near the stage in a black dress, her expression polished but restless. She had asked 3 times whether her promised shares were included in the final agreement. Grant had stopped answering. "Today," he told the audience, We complete a transaction that will redefine how the world experiences sports. Applause followed. Grant smiled. He did not mention Evelyn. He did not mention the suspended PulseMap license. He told the investors that the issue was a temporary misunderstanding caused by a family medical emergency. His attorneys had prepared a permanent licensing agreement bearing Evelyn's name and a signature copied from an older document. All Grant needed was confidence long enough for the money to move. Claire Donovan watched from the rear entrance, one hand resting on a black legal case. Rachel Kim stood beside her, holding the secure drive that contained 10 years of financial records. Evelyn waited between them. She wore an ivory suit tailored around her 8-month belly, low heels, and no jewelry except her mother's small pearl earrings. Her honey blonde hair was gathered into a smooth knot. Her face was pale, but there was no uncertainty in it. On stage, Grant lifted the pen. With this signature, he said, Mercer Sports Live begins its next chapter. The auditorium doors opened. The sound was not loud, but every head turned. Evelyn stepped inside. The cameras moved toward her before Grant could speak. A wave of whispers passed through the room. The missing pregnant wife had returned, not in tears, not under medical supervision, but walking beside an intellectual property attorney and the company's chief financial officer. Grant's hand froze above the contract. Evelyn, he said, forcing tenderness into his voice. You should not be here. She continued down the aisle. Neither should my signature. The room went silent. Claire reached the stage first and placed the original PulseMap registration beside the sale documents. The ownership line was simple: Evelyn Hart, sole creator and rights holder. Grant recovered quickly. The technology was developed during our marriage and through company resources. Claire opened the legal case. Then perhaps you remember signing this. She placed the first annual licensing agreement on the table. 10 years earlier, Grant had acknowledged in writing that PulseMap remained Evelyn's separate intellectual property and that Mercer Sports Live held only a renewable license. His signature appeared beneath every clause. He stared at it as though it belonged to another man. That agreement was temporary. Correct, Evelyn said. And I suspended it yesterday. One investor stood. Without PulseMap, what exactly are we purchasing? Grant turned toward him. The suspension is invalid. My wife is not mentally competent to make corporate decisions. The words had barely left his mouth before Rachel connected the secure drive to the auditorium system. Claire looked toward Evelyn. Are you certain? Evelyn rested one hand over her daughter. He was certain when he planned it. Grant stepped away from the table. Turn that screen off. No one moved. The Mercer Sports Live logo disappeared. In its place appeared a frozen image from the nursery camera. Grant beside the unfinished crib, Sloane wearing Evelyn's blue scarf. Sloane rose from her seat. Grant's face lost its color. Evelyn looked at the man who had believed humiliation would make her surrender. Before anyone signs anything, she said, they deserve to hear what my husband believed $600 million was worth. Rachel pressed play. Grant's recorded voice filled the auditorium before anyone could look away. Once she is declared unstable, I control the patent and the baby. The words echoed beneath the white lights, colder than they had sounded inside the nursery. Investors stopped whispering. Reporters raised their phones. Sloane stood frozen beside her chair as the screen showed Grant pacing near the unfinished crib, explaining how public humiliation would provoke Evelyn into the reaction he needed. On stage, the Real Grant reached for the control panel. Rachel stepped between him and the console. Do not touch it. Security moved closer. The recording continued. Grant described the psychiatric report prepared before Evelyn had met the doctor. He spoke about temporary guardianship, permanent licensing, and $600 million, as if his wife and unborn daughter were clauses in the same contract. Then Sloane's recorded voice asked when she would receive her shares. Every camera in the auditorium turned toward her. That conversation was private, she said. Claire did not look at her. Fraud does not become legal because it was discussed quietly. Rachel changed the screen. Bank records replaced the nursery image. Red lines connected the Maternal Health Foundation to the World Cup suite, luxury hotel rooms, designer jewelry, and private transportation. Each transaction carried Grant's authorization code. The charitable organization created to support pregnant women had financed the public betrayal of one. A board member removed his glasses. You used foundation money for your mistress? Grant faced the audience. Those were legitimate outreach expenses. Rachel opened an email. Grant's own message appeared behind him. Classify everything under maternal engagement. Evelyn never reviews the accounts. The silence that followed was absolute. Sloane stepped backward. You told me those expenses were approved. Grant turned on her. Do not speak. His command sounded smaller without obedience behind it. Claire displayed the forged medical authorization and the competency report whose conclusion had been written in advance. Then she showed the guardianship petition Grant intended to file immediately after Evelyn gave birth. The blank hospital line remained visible. Evelyn watched the investors read it. She felt her daughter move beneath her hand, steady and alive. Grant pointed toward her. She is destroying her child's financial future because she is angry about a personal mistake. Evelyn met his eyes. Our daughter's future was the first thing I protected. The lead investor closed the acquisition folder. The transaction is terminated. Grant's face tightened. You cannot walk away from $600 million. We can walk away from fraud. Daniel Ross, chairman of the Independent Audit Committee, rose from the front row and called an emergency vote. One by one, the directors raised their hands. Grant was suspended as chief executive, his signing authority revoked, and the financial records referred to federal investigators. Rachel was appointed interim chief executive until a full review could be completed. Sloane moved toward the exit, but reporters filled the aisle. Questions struck her from every direction. Had she known about the forged documents? Had she accepted charitable funds? Had Grant promised her ownership in technology he did not own? She looked back at him once. There was no love in her expression now, only calculation collapsing into fear. Grant tried to follow her, but security blocked the stage stairs and removed his access badge. The electronic click was soft. The cameras captured it anyway. Evelyn stepped toward the microphone. The same networks that had broadcast Grant's kiss now carried her face across the country. She did not mention revenge. She did not ask for sympathy. I vanished because staying would have allowed him to turn my pain into evidence against me, she said. Her voice remained calm. Silence did not mean I surrendered. It meant I was saving every word. Behind her, the screen held Grant's frozen image beside the crib. Evelyn looked directly into the nearest camera. He believed the world would watch me break. She rested one hand over her daughter. Instead, the world watched the truth arrive first. 4 months after the auditorium fell silent, Evelyn Hart woke before sunrise to the sound that had replaced every stadium roar in her memory. Her daughter was breathing against her chest. Lily Hart had arrived during a spring storm after 14 hours of labor, 6 pounds of warmth, dark lashes, and a cry strong enough to make Evelyn laugh through tears. Claire waited outside the delivery room. Rachel sent flowers without a company logo. Grant sent nothing. By then, federal investigators had seized his financial records, frozen several personal accounts, and opened inquiries into wire fraud, charitable fund misuse, forged medical documents, and attempted intellectual property theft. Sloane cooperated within days. She surrendered emails, contracts, and voice messages after discovering Grant had prepared another set of documents blaming every illegal payment on her. The woman who once believed she would inherit Evelyn's life learned that Grant had never planned to share power. He only redistributed blame. Mercer Sports Live survived, but not under Grant. Rachel became interim chief executive and ordered Evelyn's name restored to every archive, patent history, and presentation connected to PulseMap. Evelyn refused the chief executive position. She had spent too many years watching one company consume every room in her life. Instead, she negotiated a limited ethical license for PulseMap, requiring independent financial audits, employee protections, and strict bans on using personal medical information in corporate disputes. The royalties funded the Heart Protection Initiative, a national program offering legal support to pregnant women facing financial coercion, forged competency claims, or threats involving custody. Reporters called Evelyn brilliant. Investors called her disciplined. Women she had never met called her at night and whispered, "He told everyone I was unstable too." Those were the voices she remembered, not the applause, not the headlines, not the $600 million Grant had lost while trying to own what had never belonged to him. One quiet evening, Evelyn sat in the nursery beneath the pale clouds she had painted before everything changed. The tiny white shoes rested on a shelf beside Margaret Hart's photograph. Lily slept in her arms, one fist curled beneath her chin. On the television across the room, a documentary about the 2026 FIFA World Cup began replaying the quarterfinal. The stadium appeared first. White lights, waving flags, 90,000 people rising together. Then the camera moved toward the luxury box. Grant entered the frame wearing the smile that once convinced Evelyn he could protect every future they imagined. Sloane sat beside him in the blue scarf. The commentator laughed. Grant looked into the camera. The kiss began. Evelyn did not look away immediately. She watched the moment that had once felt like the end of her life and understood that it had only been the end of her silence. Lily stirred against her chest and released a small cry. Evelyn reached for the remote. The screen went black. The stadium disappeared. The crowd vanished. No music followed. Only the soft rhythm of her daughter breathing safely in her arms. Evelyn pressed her lips to Lily's forehead and stood beside the window as morning light began touching the city. Somewhere, Grant was preparing for court. Somewhere, strangers were still replaying the kiss that destroyed his empire. None of it entered the nursery. Grant Mercer had believed the whole world was watching him win. He never understood that the woman who made his victory possible had already learned the only power he could not steal: the courage to leave with the truth, protect what mattered, and never return to the place where love had been used as a weapon.